Alrighty, so let's jump right in. Okay, so my name is Kiddo, and if you don't know who Alex is, he goes by Faded AU on Instagram. He's one of the most consistent Australian vintage curators who has sold vintage t-shirts to some people you might know, including Travis Scott, Sheck West, and Travis Barker from Blink-182. In 2021, Alex collected and curated a drop with over 100 different original Nirvana t-shirts that he sourced from all around the world, some of which he paid thousands of dollars for and then proceeded to sell them for thousands of dollars. Alex and I have known each other for years now. We've bought, sold, traded t-shirts to each other, and honestly, all around, he's just a good bloke, and I respect him a lot. Alex, how's things? How you feeling? How's that for an intro?
Very good. That was a very impressive intro. Very, very impressive. You made me sound like an amazing person. So no, I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I guess where I wanted to start was, how did you get started with vintage? What was the t-shirt that began the journey for you?
It's a good question. It goes back quite a number of years ago now. Doesn't feel like it's been a long time, but it has. But before getting into vintage, I was really big into sneakers. I think that was sort of the transition a lot of people came across from collecting shoes, because it was all that sort of hype beast era. I was very young at the time. Was a huge sneakerhead. Really fell into that sort of culture and immersed myself with it. And I guess I probably have somewhat of an addictive personality in the sense that when I sort of find a liking to something, I sort of have to figure out everything about it and just become like a subject matter expert. So I was in shoes for a really long time. And then the community it became more so about the money than the shoes. And I sort of didn't enjoy it as much. A lot of people were getting scammed, and I didn't enjoy what I used to enjoy about sneakers. And then a friend of mine who was someone also into sneakers happened to meet up with him one day. And I remember this, we went bowling and he was wearing a vintage Rod Stewart t-shirt. And I was like, oh my God, what is this t-shirt? Yeah. I was like, oh, this is crazy. And he's like, oh, it's an old tour tee. And he sort of, thought nothing of it. Then I'm like, wow, that makes sense. Old concert shirts. Like, I love music. I love, t-shirts and clothing and stuff like that. And it happened to be around the time that Queen, who's my favorite band, my dad's favorite band, were touring with Adam Lambert in Victoria. So we were going to the show in a couple months' time. And I thought, wow, it'd be really cool to get a vintage Queen t-shirt to wear to the show. And I remember getting on Grails at the time because that was sort of like the best sneaker selling platform. I never really went through eBay or anything like that at the time. Grails was sort of like the place to be. And I remember I found this 2005 Queen Paul Rogers tour shirt. I think I paid maybe like $30 US. It was like a month and a half to get to me. And it's just a very simple tee, but it had like a perfect fade, just as the Queen chest hit. And I loved it. And I wore that to the concert. And I remember at the time being like, this is so cool. I'm seeing Queen with my dad, like his favorite band. Because my dad had seen them, when they toured here in the 80s for the Works. So I was like, wow, this is such a special thing. I didn't necessarily get to see the band, when Freddie was around, but like this piece of clothing, which at the time I associated with the earlier tours, but like it's something that connected both of us. So they were, decades apart. It was like a tangible thing that brought us together. So after that, honestly, I was hooked, I was addicted. And then I started spiraling basically off that. And then, it's all sort of stemmed back from that. So it's a love of Queen. And just, I've always said I love the ability to travel back in time for these tangible, shirts and just connects people that never previously would have, either met face to face. You and I started speaking through t-shirts. So I've met so many great people through this scene. And that was something that I initially liked about sneakers. But then sort of when I came across that vintage community, it was everything I could have asked for, met amazing people. And that's basically how I sort of entered into the space to make, I guess, a really long story sort of short, I guess.
No, that's fantastic. And so at what point did you transition into selling vintage? Like, was there a certain shirt that you were like, okay, I don't want this anymore, now I want to move it? Or was there, was there remnants of kind of that like sneakerhead mentality of like, okay, let's flip these shoes? Was that present for you?
Not initially, to be honest with you. It was more collecting. So I would buy t-shirts myself, would collect them, and a lot of people would ask me questions about the shirts. And I remember at the time, I was sort of buying one or two t-shirts. Etsy was really big at the time. I would just sort of not necessarily know what I was looking for, but I would just search, maybe Queen tour shirt. Didn't really know what specific tour I was looking for, but I just knew I wanted a vintage Queen shirt or different bands basically. And I started buying stuff. People started asking me questions at the time. Oh, I love this shirt. Where'd you get it from? I'm like, oh, it's like it's a vintage shirt. And I think at the time, vintage really wasn't a thing that people necessarily thought about. They couldn't I don't know if people didn't understand or it just didn't click that, oh, wow, this is an original shirt from, 20, 30 years ago. And I really liked the collecting factor, which I always have sort of had. I've always been into hobbies and collecting. And I would start to buy shirts and I would see when I was buying shirts that, not that I didn't like, but shirts that I wouldn't necessarily wear, but I knew other people would like. So like Chicago Bulls basketball tees at the time were really, really popular. And they're sort of the shirts that initially kicked it off, because initially I started this page, Faded AU, as it was just my curation of shirts that I had. It was never to sell. It was never to do anything more than just have a digital archive of the shirts I'd collected. Because one thing I learned from sneakers was over time I would buy things, I would wear them, I'd sell them, and I would forget that I owned these shoes. Like I would see a shoe like, oh my God, I had that, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I completely forgot about it. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to start an Instagram page, which at the time it was basically just a photo. It was the most makeshift setup. I had a piece of fishing wire. I'd hang it off the top of the staircase. It would trickle down. I would hang the shirt in the fishing wire, and then it just had a white background, basically just the wall. And I'd take a nice centered photo of that. Basically would put it onto the feed, and it would just say like the name of the shirt, a little brief sort of paragraph. This shirt was from the 1986 tour, whatever it might have been. And I just posted that. So then it was just a selection of all the shirts I owned. And then I started having people commenting like, oh, can I purchase this? And that was sort of at the time when I was saying, okay, I'm buying shirts for myself. There's other shirts here that I think are cool. I wouldn't wear them, but I reckon I could probably buy those, sell them, and then it'll basically make my shirt free. So if I'm buying a $50 t-shirt, I can buy 3 or 4 other shirts, sell them. I make $100, and the 1 or 2 shirts I bought, I'm at a net neutral. I haven't made any money, I haven't lost any money. It's perfect. I've just got two shirts for free. And at the time I was young, I was working in a restaurant. I was probably getting like maybe $18 cash in hand. So I wasn't making money or anything like that. So for me to get a shirt I want and be able to wear it and not have to pay for it was perfect. So it sort of started as a way just to fund my own addiction, going back to it, buying shirts. And then the page just kept evolving. I think everything, if you look at anything in your life, timing is one of the most important things. And I think the time that I sort of entered into the vintage community, it was really in an infancy stage. So people weren't really, there were other pages. I'm not saying I was the first. There's plenty of other pages, people that I followed that I still follow to this day and took a lot of inspiration from when I first launched the page. But basically it kicked off this page that has just gone on for years and years and years now. And it all started purely for just a documenting purpose of what I owned. And then, just had that realization, I can make a little bit of money of this to fund myself, never to start a business, never to start something that I would, continue for years on end. It was really just for, okay, right now, this is going to help me in the meantime. Let's just do that. It's perfect. So, and then it's just, evolved and snowballed from there, really.
Yeah. So when it comes to like curating the drops, like what was the tipping point that got you to that point? Did you realize that, okay, I've kind of got this theme of like 10 to 20 the same shirt, like should I make this Shopify website? Like how did you transition from, okay, I'm selling stuff to cover my own tees, but now maybe I should like have a logo, do my branding, have the website ready? Like what was that tipping point for you?
To be honest, it was a very natural process, and it's not something that was incredibly thought out. Like you would look back now and be like, oh my God, so much time and effort would have gone into, creating the logo, creating the brand, creating just everything about Fader. But in reality, it was something that sort of just evolved over time. And like I said, timing was a really important thing. The community wasn't huge. So whoever was posting at that time, naturally, people, if they were looking for vintage tees, there was only a handful of people they could really go to. Whereas now, and obviously through COVID, there was so many different sellers. So you really had a variety of who you could go to purchase shirts, look at shirts. But I guess to go back to it, Instagram DMs for me, not that it was a nightmare, but the back and forth of messaging people just became a lot. And
been there,
been there,
done
course.
that.
I know, and I forgot about it for a long time. I did a story sale recently, and I remember like, oh my God, doing DMs and
the story
having sending tracking.
That'll do it.
Definitely. It reminded me. It was like a flashback to when the page first started. But the idea, I guess, behind starting the website was mainly because I was selling stuff, and it wasn't the most efficient way that I could do it. I thought, you know what, like there was people at the time like Burnt Out, for example, NL Vintage. Those two people for me were the people that I really followed and took a lot of inspiration from. So I think if you look at the real start of the page when I started selling, it was sort of a combination of both NL Vintage and Burnt Out. And like, I sort of sat in the middle in terms of what I was posting. It was taking inspiration from both of them. And they both know that I've told them that hundreds of times, that like, if it wasn't for them, the page would not be what it is. But then obviously it takes time to sort of evolve your own style. And that's, I guess, where the drop started coming from, because they really curated what they sold. And initially when I launched the website, again, it was just for convenience of selling. It made things easier. I could put people's tracking on their order and they would get it automatically by email, and it centralized everything. It made everything really, really easy. And the first few drops I did, it didn't start with band tees. It was nothing to do with, premium band tour, pop culture. It was nothing to do with that. It was sort of just like old like sports tees. Like I had a real good eye for like vintage sports tees, not the real common like Bulls prints you would see. There was really unique ones that would sell really well for me. Like I remember I had like a Nesquik t-shirt, like I had random movie t-shirts, TV show t-shirts. So it was just a real mix of everything. And I like to sell things that I'm interested in. So after doing after getting rid of all those random miscellaneous shirts, the band stuff was what I was passionate about. I've grown up around music. I love music. So I was like, it makes most sense for me. It's something I'm passionate about. I don't want to be selling something, because I feel like if you're selling something just for the purpose of making money, you lose an aspect. Like that passion's not there. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to take this seriously, I'm going to have to sell things that I actually care about. And for me, it was pretty easy. Okay, music, band. That's pretty much what it came down to. So I guess the curation process just started with, okay, what are bands that people love? What are bands that I appreciate as well? It didn't necessarily have to be bands that I necessarily listened to. It was also a way to experiment and, enter new genres that I'd never even really heard about, which was, again, that was something that I had fallen in love with, getting band tees, like a Cannibal Corpse shirt. I was like, this is crazy. I've never listened to a Cannibal Corpse song before, but I love this shirt.
And those prints, man, those prints.
Yeah, I know, they're crazy. They're crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was the gateway for me to dabble in certain things that I'd never, in the past, I'd never really looked into. So it was sort of like just a really long R&D phase of figuring out what I liked, what sold well, and then just mixing the drops. That they have a theme to them. It's, if you go to start to finish, if you look at the first tee and the last tee, they might not necessarily make sense. But the way I see it is every drop, it sort of has like one shirt links to another, which links to another, and it sort of creates a theme of the drop. And I've really loved the theme drops. I've done a few over the years where obviously it's a lot very band predominant. But like I've done all over print drops. I've done the big Nirvana drop, which you mentioned earlier. I've done a real mix of things, and I like that sort of experimentation. I remember ages ago, I was actually talking about this yesterday. I bought a new Carhartt jacket. I love the Carhartt jackets, but about like 6 years ago, I think it would have been, I came across a Carhartt jacket for the first time that was like heavily beaten, distressed. I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. I felt like I'd found like the next greatest thing. And I remember doing a drop of just Carhartt jackets at the time. And I think they were maybe like $150, which I was like, this is so fair.
Yeah.
And then none of them sold. Like no one wanted Carhartt jackets.
Yeah, listen, you were early, okay? You were
I was a little
you were
bit.
just early. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
That's
they sat on the website. But that was the thing. It was just a process of learning what sold, what didn't. And then obviously over time you're going to, get better at it.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably maybe 4 years ago, I feel like I really got down pat a process of being like, okay, 21 to sort of 30 t-shirts ranging in sort of 3 categories. The way I see it is like the high ticket items, and you've got your mids, which mids generally I consider a little bit higher. And then you've got your everyday tees. And the idea for me with every drop, I don't want to come in with every shop being $500 because it's not realistic for a lot of people. I can't afford to spend $500 on a t-shirt, So the drops are for everyone basically. If you want to spend $75 on a tee, if you want to spend $3,000 on a tee, the idea is that you can go to a faded drop and there's going to be something for everyone. It might not be this month, the next month there might be a band you're really into. So it's just, I want people to have the accessibility factor, want them to go on the website and just be able to buy something. So that sort of formula, once I worked that out to really spread it across, price point, genres, eras, I sort of cracked this code that it just worked, and I've tried to continue that. I've done little tweaks here and there. Some things work, some things don't work, but it's just constantly a learning process. Every single drop I do, I learn something. So, the more drops, the more shirts I go through, the better the website will be. And at the end of the day, the better for the customer and the consumer. So,
Absolutely.
it's just a long learning process, really.
And that's the key, isn't it? Is just to keep learning and to not be complacent and to always be looking for new information that might help us. I guess that's a big reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you, is the fact that through these conversations, one, you and I can learn stuff from each other, but also someone who's watching this right now is going to have some of their questions answered and maybe begin to spark ideas that they hadn't thought about before.
100%.
In terms of like, so you started as a digital archive, right? Have you ever regretted selling or passing on a t-shirt? Maybe there was a t-shirt for a really good deal like early on, or even one that you've sold recently or in the last few years that you're like, oh, man, I wish I'd just kept that.
Yeah, I think there was a few instances early on where I sold t-shirts that I was like, oh, I wish I'd kept that. One of those was a Queen all over print, the kind of magic. It's like the crazy color one. Do you know what I'm talking about? With the green, and let me get it for reference. I've got it just over here.
Get the reference.
This wasn't planned, but I know
this wasn't planned, and then he pulls the t-shirt out.
It's
wasn't planned. Oh, by the way, I got that one t-shirt back. I got that back.
This one.
Okay.
So for me, being a Queen collector, this was one of the. This for me was a grail. There's not really many all over print Queen shirts, and I had this shirt very early into Faded, and I sold it. Because at the time I sold it, there was multiple online, so you could buy them.
Oh, you were like, this is going to be around forever. I can get it back
100%,
if I want to.
100%. I think I sold it for $325, which at the time was the most expensive shirt. Yeah. Oh my God, it was crazy. I was selling $50 tees. So to sell something for $320, I was like, oh my God, this is insane.
Absolutely.
Sold this. There was others online for like $350, $400. I was like, worst case scenario, if I want it back, I pay an extra $50, pay an extra $100. Sold it. And then like someone bought every single Queen all over a kind of magic shirt for like the next 3 years. And that I learned my lesson after that. And after that, I never really, if there was a shirt I loved, and it's information I tell people now, if people want to sell me shirts and they're like, oh, I'm 50-50 on this one. I always say, if there's any sort of sentimental value, if you're going to regret selling the shirt, just keep it, because it's not worth the $150, $200, $300.
Yeah.
Because once you sell them, you can buy the same shirt back, but especially if they're sentimental ones, like people's, like, a shirt your dad used to wear. Yeah, sure, you can buy the print back, but it's not the shirt your dad owned. You know what I mean? So that definitely helped me learn the lesson early on not to sell tees. And then I have one more story that the guy actually messaged me about it the other day. A while ago, really early into my into the page, I did a collaboration with a store in Melbourne called the Dough Store. It was like a sneaker consignment store basically. And sort of once a month, I would put like 20 shirts in there, and they would sell them basically. And they'd just do like a little collection of vintage tees, right? And I had this Queen, this Freddie Mercury Queen Slightly Mad shirt, which was like a bootleg Italian print. It was amazing, such a great shirt. And it was at the time when I was collecting, but I was only collecting and buying things that fit me. So if I bought something that didn't fit me, I would sell it and be like, all right, I'll buy it again at some point. Yeah. And I got this shirt, and it's an incredible shirt, and it just was too short. It's like a 27 and a half length. Yeah. And I can't, I'm too tall for a 27 and a half length. So I was like, you know what? I'll sell it and I'll buy it back. It'll happen. After I sort of just learned my lesson with this on.
Yeah.
But I put it in the store, and it was sitting for like a week. I think it was probably a week and a half it had been there. And I remember so clearly talking to my fiance, who was my girlfriend at the time, being like, don't know how I feel about selling this shirt. And she's like, if you don't want to sell it, just take it back. Like, you tell people that all the time. I was like, you know what? That's a great idea. And this was a Friday afternoon, and every Friday they would send me like the weekly tape of what had sold. And I remember being like, you know what? You're 100% right. Like, it sounds like a lie. At that time, within 2 minutes, I basically got an email from them saying like, here's your weekly payout. And that shirt was in there. And I genuinely felt sick. Like, my stomach dropped. I felt terrible. I was like, how did I do this? Like, I had a moment of realization straight away. I was like, I sold this shirt. I should have never sold this shirt. And that one really hit me hard, because I knew it was going to be hard. Like, I was just daydreaming, thinking that I was going to be able to find another one. And then I was like, oh, do you know who bought it? Because I was like, okay, I need to figure out who bought it. And he's like,
I need to get it back.
Yeah, that was the idea. I was like, I'm going to find this shirt again. I'm going to find who bought it and just offer him more money and buy it off him. And then I asked them, they said, just a guy walking off the street bought the shirt. And I was like, you're kidding me. Like, I'm never going to find this shirt again. I was really upset about it. And then probably a month later, I had a guy DM me, and he's like, "Hey mate," like he hadn't followed me, like we hadn't gone back and forth or anything like that at the time. And he's like, "Hey mate, hope you're doing well. Thanks so much. Bought this shirt, absolutely love it." And I was like, "Oh, thanks mate. Which shirt did you pick up?" And he sent me a photo, and it was that shirt.
So, and then you start
like,
strategizing. You're like, "Oh, okay, how do I do this?"
I was like, okay, I've got to give this guy my firstborn child. Like, I need that shirt back. And I said to him, I said, "Oh, you know, I'm so glad you love it. It's a great shirt.
but like you don't love it that much."
So if by any chance you want to sell it, let me know.
Yeah.
I'm always looking to buy shirts back." And then he's like, "Yeah, done. Like, I'll let you know." And then I think he messaged me probably a month after, and he's like, "Hey, I saw this LL Cool J shirt you posted. Like, how much you asking for it?" I was like, "Oh." I think I maybe said to him like, "Oh, this one's going to be in a future drop, or maybe I'm keeping this one. I'm not sure." I was like, "But if you want, I'd be keen to trade it for the Queen shirt." And he was like, "Oh, maybe." And I was like, "Look, I'm happy to do this." And I think I gave him like $150 on top. So I paid probably 3 times more than what he paid for the Queen shirt, but I got it back, and I was very, very happy. And it's funny, he messaged me like literally 3-4 days ago. Just being like, "Oh, do you still have that Queen shirt?" And I do. I still have it.
So do you have
in
it
a bag
handy
somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Nah,
So it's not on the rack behind there.
So
You
all
just
the
stashing
shirts,
it.
I know. No, so in my wardrobe, I've got all the shirts that I wear that fit me. That one, because it's too small, it's folded in a bag, and I've got a box of just probably like 100 Queen shirts, like bootlegs, licensed prints, just everything, but all sizes that don't fit me. Because during COVID, I was working from home. I was lucky enough to work throughout the whole time, so I was still making my normal wage. I wasn't going out. I was saving heaps of money. So me being the smart person I am, when prices were going through the roof, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to buy every Queen shirt. So like every Queen shirt that went up, I basically just bought. So I have so many Queen shirts now. But I'm very happy about that. I need to do a long form video, maybe like a Queen collection of some sort.
I mean, even thinking about that, like if you could because you'd get international attention as well for that. Like who else is collecting Queen tees? Like Queen fans that absolutely love it.
Yeah, especially in Japan. A lot of Asia in general really love Queen and Freddie Mercury. Like you look at some of the old Japanese shows when Queen toured there, and it was incredible. So I know there's a huge portion of my customers in Japan in particular that love whenever I put Queen stuff up, they're usually the first ones onto it. But long story short, I have definitely regretted shirts. But I think I've learned my lesson. I think I've sort of come to the point as well through collecting where I'm like, okay, when some shirts get to a certain value, you're like, it's stupid for me to hold onto this shirt now because, being a grown up and having adult expenses.
So what is that value to you then?
Well, that's a good question.
Is it like 5x what you paid for it? Is it like,
it's got nothing to do with what I paid. Okay. It's got to do with I'll give you an example. So for example, I had the Soundgarden Carly shirt, the one with all the arms, the woman with all the arms.
Yes, I do.
So I had a US version of that shirt that I bought probably 5-6 years ago. Don't remember what I paid for it. It wouldn't have been anything crazy, but that shirt, it didn't fit me, but it just had the most incredible fade that I could never. I was like, I can't sell this shirt. And recently I had an offer on it, and I was like, as much as I love this shirt, I've enjoyed it. I've had it for so long now. And I've got things to pay for my wedding. So you know what? Let's sell the shirt. Sold it. And it's gone towards something that, as much as I would love to have that shirt, it gets to a point where, certain things like I've enjoyed my time with that. It's never going to fit me. It's time for someone else to enjoy it now. But there's a very fine line between that regret and that appreciation for being like, you know what, I own that shirt. I was really happy that I had it for, a good stretch of time. I'm happy to let it go and go on to the next home. So that was sort of one of those situations. But it's definitely, I know some horror stories where people sell shirts and you can never get them back, and it's the worst. So like I said, if there's ever any doubt, for anyone that's a buyer out here, if there's ever any doubt, a seller, and you're wanting to sell something from your personal, just sleep on it. Just give it one more night, sleep on it, because I promise you it's not.
One more night, and then 6 years later, when you need to get married, is when you can sell it.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
All right. Well, that ties in nicely.
Hold on. Have you had any shirts you regret selling? Sorry to put it back on you, but I know you've had some crazy shirts. I was actually on your website looking at your sold archive the other day when you did that big Australian drop.
So
is there any shirts over time you regret?
Listen, I think I've reached the point now where like I'm just sold so many items that like I'm looking at clothing as clothing, unfortunately. In terms of like personal tees though, like I've got vintage tees that I've worn in music videos, or I've worn internationally on travel, and I've associated that piece of clothing with like that trip, for example.
Yeah.
So it's less about like, oh, that's a cool tee. It's more like, okay, where was I when I was wearing that tee? And it's more of that level of sentimentality. The other thing is like I've got this like a Sade Soldier of Love tee from 2011.
Oh, wow.
Like
Yeah.
it's nothing like too crazy, but like I think it's going for a couple $100 now. But the thing is like when I bought it for $30, but it got lost in the mail. And so one day I went to the post office and was like, hey, like, what's the story with this? And a friend I had made there was like, hey, this parcel is about to get sent back. It's got your name on it. Do you want it? And I'm like, you know what that is? That's got to be it. And sure enough, it's like that tee. So it's like, as you said, at a certain point is like, is it worth the $200 or $300 you're going to get from it? Or like, is just this a good shirt? And like, I know with something like that is that it is likely to maintain value or go up. And I've seen it go up in value. So like when I first got it, it was maybe worth $100, and I've just seen it go up in value. And also Sade's the GOAT. So why would I, you know?
Yeah.
I guess that ties in nicely into my next question I had for you, which is, how do you define what a vintage grail is? Like, what's your personal criteria? What's the separation between this is an expensive t-shirt that everybody wants, and then this is something that might be expensive, but it's actually just a grail to you personally?
It's a good question. I think the criteria for every person differs, you know, and probably at different points in my life, my criteria differed a lot. When I first sort of started collecting, when I was younger, it was probably like, oh, a grail for me is like a crazy expensive shirt that I'm never going to attain. Whereas nowadays, for me, a grail is just something that I guess holds a sentimental value to me. It's hard because there's shirts that I've owned that I would consider grails, but in my eyes, a grail is something you should own, that you should sort of never let go. Like it's something that sort of goes with you to the grave.
100%.
But I've had grails that were a grail at one point in time for me, whether it was because it was incredibly rare, it was, really hype or popular at the time, and sort of by what everyone else's sort of interpretation of a grail was. I was like, okay, this is a grail. Like I've got a grail now. It didn't really hold any sentimental value to me. It was more so because of sort of what the market dictated a grail was. Yeah. And for me, I was like, you know what? That's a grail. It was very easy, especially in the sneaker game, to be like that. When you get certain shoes that I thought were maybe incredibly ugly, but everyone's like, oh my God, this shoe is a grail. Like this is the best ever. And you're like, oh yeah. I'm never selling this. This is a grail.
Yeah.
I think at the moment for me, I've so many shirts have come through the store now. So for me, a grail is either incredibly unique, something that I know that if I sold it, I would never get it back, or something with sentimental value that either, is attached to me, or like something that's attached to my dad. Yeah. Like I've got, the original tour shirts of the show that my dad went to, and it's got, the Wednesday night date on the back of the show that he was at,
Very cool.
And he didn't buy the shirt at the time because he's like, I didn't have $25 or whatever it was to spend on a shirt. Like money could go to other things that were more important. So to have that now, like that's something that I'm like, oh, I'm never going to sell that. Like it's something that, it relates to me. So that is a grail. But then there's like, that Queen shirt where I'm a huge Queen fan. I let it go once, I would never let it go again. So for me, that is a grail. And then there's other shirts that are just really unique that have no value at all in my collection. Yeah. But I'm like, I love this shirt. Like, this is one of the first shirts I bought. I could put on my story for a story sale price of $40, and everyone's gonna be like, I don't want that shirt. Like, what is that? Yeah. So it really changed. I think depending on the person, a grail is going to be a different. I don't think you have different criteria for it, and it depends on the point in time, and in someone's collecting sort of journey. I guess it really differs. It differs. It's something that's changed a lot for me at the time. If you'd asked me when I first started getting into vintage, heart-shaped box or an Induro shirt, I'd been like, oh my God, they're grails. For a lot of people, that is a grail. But is that because it's an amazing shirt?
When you've had 100, you're like,
yeah. And then is it because of the value? Or exactly right. Exactly right. So I love and I appreciate the shirts, but like for me, if I got them, I'm like, oh, like this, I'm very privileged to have this shirt, but like there's other shirts in my collection, like a Queen shirt or, a bootleg shirt of a band I love. Like that to me is more special than just the most popular, most expensive t-shirt basically. So yeah, I don't know. It changes constantly, but I think as I've gotten older, the definition for me of a grail has really refined. You know, you'll probably remember really early in, or for a long time, the Queen stuff. I was a huge collector of Queen tees, and that was something that sort of, when I got into buying Queen shirts, the next best thing was like, okay, what from my childhood can I buy that I still love? And I was like, oh, the Mask movie. And I was buying them when they're like $120, $150.
Once again, super early on that wave as well.
Yeah.
That's
insane. And the market just went crazy.
Yeah.
And then like I ended up, I think I probably, the cheapest the cheapest Mask shirt I would have bought would have been like 100, maybe $120. And then the most expensive over time, I probably end up paying over $2,000 at a certain point in time. And then I had all these shirts, and I was like, it was sort of, as I got a little bit more mature from a, collecting point of view, I was like, you know what? I love these shirts, but maybe it's time to let them go. Like, again, that's when it's just sort of that fine line. Like, at the time I was looking to buy a house. I was like, you know what? I've got a lot of money tied up in these shirts. Maybe I sell them and it goes towards a house. And for me now, being in your own house is like a grail. Like that, it gives you more satisfaction than any t-shirt ever, So it's definitely changed, but I've enjoyed, and I've been very fortunate enough to have a lot of my grails over time. And I've been able to tick them off the list. So for me, I feel very fortunate, and there's not many shirts out there where I'm like really dying for. Whereas when I started, I feel like when you start in anything, you have that hunger to be like, okay, I have to conquer this thing. I need to find every single one of these shirts.
List.
I need to own them at some point. Exactly right. Right. Everyone has them. And no matter if that's a $10 tee or a $10,000 tee, people can collect what they want. And that's the beauty about vintage. You can literally buy anything you could possibly imagine, because most of the time they printed a shirt of it at some point. So that's another thing that I loved about it. So, but been very, very lucky to have a lot of my grails over time and enjoy them.
And I think, like, even on that note is the fact that you've sold people's grails to them. There's people who have come to you and
100%.
You've sold them their favorite t-shirt like that.
100%.
And can you speak on like how that, I guess, that's an important part of selling as well, is understanding we can't keep everything for ourselves. And sometimes the greatest joy is like giving somebody else that feeling as well, because we can't keep everything. So
100%. There's no, I think a lot of sellers, you would have had the exact same mindset at a point in time where there's genuinely nothing better when someone hits you up and they're like, I just bought this from the drop. This is a shirt. Like, I went to this show. Like yesterday's drop on Sunday, I had a Tool 1996 tour shirt in there. And a guy local lives, like 20 minutes from me, picked up and he's like, oh my God, I went and saw them at Festival Hall, this shirt, thank you so much. And for me, it makes me so happy, because to me, it's not to say it's not a special shirt, but it's a shirt that I don't have any sort of ties to. But for him, it's like, he experienced that era. He went to that show, he was there. So to have something tangible, it's like, it's the same feeling that I'm assuming my dad would get when he gets a Queen shirt. You know what I mean? Something to tie him back to his youth, or to, a really great memory. So for me, when people hit me up saying, oh my God, my dad had this shirt, or I went to this show when I was a kid, like that for me is the most special thing. That's what I love doing. That was another reason as to why I sort of got into it. It's never been about the money. Cause like I said, if you focus on the money, you're not going to go anywhere. You need to have that passion, and the passion for collecting, curating, sourcing. Like I just love all the nitty gritties of it is what I love. And then seeing the end consumer post a shirt, someone being like, oh my God, love this shirt, just got like that's the best part about it.
Yeah. So I guess on that note, what is the craziest or most expensive deal you've ever made for a vintage tee?
Sold or bought? Because I think in terms of bought,
let's do both.
Okay, well, if we talk about buying, I think the most expensive order or the most expensive bundle I've ever bought was from you.
Yes, sir.
Before the Nirvana drop.
Speak about it.
So this was, wow. So when was that? I think the Nirvana drop was 2020.
Yeah.
If memory serves, I think it was around 2020. It was before.
I think it was, okay.
Well, it was
I did do
COVID.
some research. I think it was circa November 2021.
Sounds about right.
So
Actually, yes, you're right.
Because I remember I was like in between places. I was living in Brisbane City at one point, and like then COVID was kicking off, and I think it was after COVID, and like, because I remember you flew up and I saw you in Brisbane as well.
Yes.
So like it was past 2020.
Yeah, you're right. It was 2021, and it was definitely it was November. I think it was the 27th of November. I did the drop.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I bought from you maybe it was maybe 8 Nirvana shirts. Was it? It was something like that. It was a crazy amount. It was a crazy amount. And it was like, and it was like a heart-shaped box, in utero. There was the Roskilde Festival shirt. Like there was a lot of really great shirts. And it was that is
Well, I'm
definitely
honored, man.
the biggest
I'm
order.
honored. I appreciate it.
It was great.
Listen, I remember, like, I don't know. It wasn't that I didn't trust you. It was that I wanted to make sure you trusted me and we could go through that transaction properly because, like, I'd never sold multiple tees like that. Like, it's okay when you're selling one shirt because you're like, all right. But if you're selling bundles and, like, I think this is probably a good segue to what we can speak about next, but it is the importance of, like, building brand and also having skin in the game with your face, with your name, and how that allows you to do transactions like that. And can you speak on that? Like, just that layer of trust that comes with the fact that, okay, when I go to Faded AU, I know I'm dealing with Alex. I'm good. Like,
it's something that takes a long time. And sort of going back to the first sort of question when we spoke about when I was in the sneaker community, that was one of the reasons why I sort of distanced myself from it, because it was harder and harder to find people to trust. Everything became about money. People were getting scammed left, right, and center. And that's why I just like fell out of love with it. I was like, this is just, it's not a passion anymore. People are just doing this for money. People are trying to scam each other. People are trying to get the better of each other. And that's what inevitably steered me, towards vintage. And I think around COVID time, when sort of everyone was locked up, that's sort of when we saw people's personalities sort of step out behind the seller page. I think before then I hadn't really shared myself. I hadn't gone on any lives. I hadn't done anything like that. But there was, lives became a huge thing. People were stuck at home. People wanted to experiment, and, you had the virtual fleet come out. We were talking before, Rio used to do, the interviews and lives, and it just
shout out to Rio. Shout out to Rio.
I know.
We need you back, big fella. Big 100%. Inspiration.
We need to start it again. Yeah, definitely.
Somebody send this to Rio. If not, I'm sending it to him.
I'll DM it to him as well. I'll DM it as well.
100%.
But like that at that time, everyone sort of stepped out from behind the camera and was sort of comfortable in, saying, "Hey, I'm Alexander. I run this page," and it became a lot more of a community at that time, because before you had people like, you appreciated people's page, but you didn't really know people you didn't know
it was just about the tees. It was at a tees 100%, and like 100%. Leaving a comment and fire emoji. Like,
you're exactly right. Responding to story, that was it. So then when COVID started happening, people started talking and building relationships outside of just the t-shirts. It was a really great time for the vintage community. I think everyone really thrived. It brought a lot of new people to the sort of scene. Whether it was in the States, becoming familiar with a lot of overseas sellers. A lot of people becoming aware of the Australian market as well. Because before then, there wasn't necessarily a platform. Obviously Instagram was the platform, but there wasn't a way to really put yourself out there. So, during that time, I met a lot of great people. I think that's when you and I probably started talking. And then, when I sort of, I think a lot of people knew I was doing the Nirvana drop. It took, a year and a half to sort of curate and collect 100 Nirvana shirts, which, looking back, like I've just
insane.
It's crazy.
It gets crazier the more you think about it, because
I know.
Also the prices of the tees now. It's like,
I know, and it was just like, now that I think of it, the Nirvana drop was always supposed to be 15 shirts. That was the first thing, because I'd never owned or sold Nirvana shirts. I had 15 Nirvana shirts, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to sell these. So like, you know what? Maybe I'll do 25 shirts.
I'll just get a couple extras, then I could sell those.
Yeah. So that was my excuse to not sell the shirts, because I wanted to be like, at that time, like, look at all the shirts I have. Like, I had these crazy Nirvana shirts. And then it got to the point where I was like, okay, this is getting like stupid. Got to 50 Ts. I'm like, this is ridiculous. 70 Ts, 80 Ts. I'm like, okay. When I get to 100,
the whole time you and I are talking like, hey, hey kiddo, look what I'm
if you think about it,
this, but I'm like, I believe it. Listen, you don't even tell me.
And you had so many of them all just sitting together, and I think you came to me like, look, I'm playing with the idea of selling them. Would you be keen? I think we went back and forth for a little while. Super easy.
Honestly,
to do
I just wanted you to see. I wanted to see you get that done, because it hadn't been done before. So I was like, at that point, I was just a believer. I was like, yeah, man, like, as long as you can give me a fair price, I'm good. Let's roll. Like, this will be cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to see it all come out. So
it was great. Yeah. It was great. If it wasn't for your tees, it would have been a 90 tee drop. I probably would still be collecting. I wouldn't have found the last few t-shirts. I appreciate you putting your trust in me to buy them, and then obviously put them in the drop.
Man, I'm honored. It was cool. And I think that's like, I don't know, I can't remember when I did I think it was December 2020 is when I really dived into the Aussie vintage t-shirt tags.
Yeah.
And so it was just fascinating too to just see during that period is like, as you said, the communities are kind of all starting to communicate. You had like Americans on lives with Aussies. You had like some Canadians as well. And like it was a really cool time. But what I noticed was just like how interconnected and how everybody understood each other. It was like, it wasn't, the thing we shared in common was the vintage teas, but like everybody, those who get it, get it. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And like you said before, then there just wasn't that connection.
Yeah.
And it also made people, going back to the Aussie teas, it also made people aware of what we actually had in Australia.
Yeah.
Because if you think before then, like Acme, top heavy people, TSP tags, people were very hesitant to buy them, especially in the Asian market. I think at the time, people weren't really looking to buy top heavy Acme, and that probably benefited us for a long period of time, scooping those teas up, because people didn't necessarily know if they were vintage, if they were
legit.
Like, they had no idea.
They're like, what is this Australian fake tag? Like, what are they doing down there?
Yeah, and because that was the time everything was coming out. Like, you think out of Thailand, they were making those like no-name, just bootleg tags and blanks and stuff like that. So it gave people a lot of information. And then obviously you came out with the tag guide, which people still reference. I still look at it to get an idea of eras and things like that. So it was a great time for the vintage community. The rest of the world probably suffered a lot. But in terms of growth,
that was the one plus. That was the one plus.
Yeah, 100%. That was the only, the silver lining, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So I guess I've got a bunch more questions here. I still want to go on with like, what is, which way I can take this? If you had to wear only one vintage T-shirt for a year, which one would it be? Just one. And let's assume like you don't have to worry about like washing it. It never gets smelly or anything. I'm saying like one T-shirt. You had 100 of them and you just wore the same T-shirt all year. Which one would it be?
That's easy because I'm currently doing it.
Just
it's
one
not this
T-shirt.
T-shirt I'm wearing. It's not this T-shirt I'm wearing. But I have the most perfect Fruit of the Loom heavy cotton blank.
Okay, it's not even a band tee. It's just
it's
a
not
plain
even a band tee.
Just
it
a plain
is just
tee.
perfect.
Yeah.
It fits perfect. The collar's nice. It's distressed.
Yeah.
I wear that T-shirt.
Yeah.
Very frequently. I wash it. I do wash it, and it's making the shirt wear a lot more over time. Because I think when I got it, it wasn't dead stock, but it was close to dead stock.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've just rinsed and repeated. Because look, I'm not a very flashy person. I don't like wearing loud, colorful things. I've always sort of just been black, basically. So having T-shirts was a way to sort of express things, bands, my interests and things like that. So I've always done that. And look, I do wear a lot of other shirts. But
in terms of the
blank,
it would be the
blank's perfect.
It would be the blank,
because you can dress it up, you can dress it down. Like, I'll go to the post office wearing it with some track pants, or you put a nice pair of pants on with some boots, and it looks good. Like, so it's practical. If I had to say in terms of a print, I really like a simple, a black tee with just a white print. There's one that comes to mind, which I've never owned this shirt in my size, but I've got it right behind me. It's one of my favorite T-shirts. This is, we sort of spoke about it a little bit earlier, but I love this print. I love this.
Yes.
If I can get one in my size, that would probably be, because it's easy. Like, it's a simple black and white graphic. It's not too loud. It's not too crazy. I do wish it had the different back print on there. I prefer the US back print. But a T-shirt similar to this. I know.
That's so cool with the Australian dates on it, though.
I know, but if you look at it, like the US one basically has the Soundgarden. It doesn't have it on the front, which I much prefer this front graphic, but it has it across the back. And then it's got 1994, then it's got all the dates, so it fills the back of it.
Yeah.
Whereas this to me is just a little bit too it's a little bit too simple. But in terms of, I was wearing a shirt every day, this is one of my favorite prints. Because it's simple. It's black and white. It's easy. Yeah. But for a very long period of time, I was wearing the Misfits Crimson Ghost.
Yes. The glow in the dark.
Yes. Yeah. That's one of my other shirts that I wear very frequently. I've gone through a few of those now to find sort of like the perfect fit. Yeah. And I love that shirt. So if I had to choose a shirt I've owned and worn, it would probably be that one. Yes. If you're happy to accept a blank, it would just be the perfectly thrashed out blank. Yeah. Fantastic. I need a good white one though. I'm still hunting for like the perfect white blank. I feel like they're always too see-through, or the sleeves for some reason are always too short. But those Fruit of the Loom heavy cotton are just are perfect. So that'd be my one and done.
Okay, so what is the least you've ever paid for a t-shirt and it was still an absolute heater, like the best deal, and it was just like a crazy tee?
You know what? Actually, people like I've had people throw in t-shirts here and there, like nothing too crazy. I would say
one that you paid for. One that you paid for.
One that I paid for. One that I paid for. Okay, this is a shirt that I paid for.
Okay,
I'll do a bit of an intro. So this was on Facebook Marketplace. Yeah, this was on Facebook Marketplace a long time ago. Like it was probably 2021, probably 2020, maybe even 2019. Like it was very, very, very early.
Yeah.
A guy posted a shirt. I can't remember what it was, but I think it might have been a Dinosaur Junior shirt. Or it was, he posted some tee. I messaged him. I said, do you have any other shirts? And
golden question,
said,
by the way.
Golden question.
Which
a lot of people didn't do for a long period of time,
yes.
I feel.
Do you have anything else? Always ask.
Yeah, literally. And he was like, yep, I've got all these. And he's like, like, I'll do, I think I maybe paid $400 for the lot, right?
So he still got a decent deal.
I still pay, I think, because he was doing him I think he was doing him $50 a tee. And I think I ended up buying 10 tees for him. And he's like, I'll do you $400. I was like, okay, like I'm happy to do that. And at the time, like it was still a good deal, but it wasn't crazy. So this shirt, I think I paid about $50 for it. But in today's market, this is again one of those grail shirts. Yeah,
fine wine.
Well, it's probably one of the greatest aged shirts I've ever had. But that probably gives it away a little bit.
Unreal.
But it's
and you got this in a bundle, like not even just by itself.
I got this
with
in a bundle
others as well.
Yeah, and it's funny because
You've
I
had
really
this one
wanted...
for a minute,
so long, for so long, and it's got cut tag, but like mock neck. The fade on this is just like the shirt I'm wearing has a bit of a fade to it. Yeah, but if you like
the
put
fade
that
on that
side by side, oh my god, it's just incredible. And the graphic itself, it's not like the traditional red that you see most of the time. It's like a fluoro orange almost. Yeah. And this shirt, it's never fit me, but I've always kept it. Never fit wears it. Yeah. So she gets to enjoy this one. But yeah, at the time, Red Hot Chili Peppers, like this was probably maybe a $200-ish shirt, $250 shirt. Yeah. But now, like the last Red Hot Chili Peppers long sleeve I had was like, I think I sold for 2,000 Australian. Insane. And that was a worse size than this without the fade. So in terms of like a come up, considering what I paid for it back then to now, that's a big one. But that's a crazy one. This is one of those shirts I would never sell this. I would never sell this. Like people have offered crazy money. Yeah, it would just not go anywhere. It's just is it because of that story as well? Knowing like, and it's kind of like at the start of your journey. So you're like, man, I like it. It's almost a memory for you. You're right. It's an accumulation of things because one, it was a great story. It was like I remember opening that parcel and just being so happy. Like when I opened, like, oh my god, because the photo he sent me was so dimly lit. I couldn't tell if they were. I couldn't tell if it was real. I didn't know if it was a legit shirt. I didn't know if it was a reprint, if it was a white shirt. I couldn't tell. But the one shirt that I had photos from that he was selling, I was like, you know what? It's worth the punt anyway. And I just took the chance. And it's become one of my favorite shirts. Yeah, and it's probably one of the longest shirts that I've had. It's been over 5 years now that I've had that shirt. In terms of sentimental value, like I said, my fiance, she always wears it. And it was a shirt we wore when we met Travis Barker the first night as well. So
now it has like it's all adding up. Yeah, that's cool.
Exactly right. So like I've got good memories with that shirt. So I love it. I love it.
Well, that's probably a good segue. Can we talk about how you met Travis Barker and selling tees to Travis Barker? Like, let's dive into that. How'd you make it happen? How'd you make it happen, Alex?
It was very random. Very random. My fiance, she has a very she's studied marketing. She's very clocked onto in terms of what marketing and social everything in that sort of realm.
She's tapped in and she understands the game.
100%. And I knew Blink were coming. And I know Travis is a huge collector. Like I think he's been in this scene for such a long period of time. He's experienced them more so than anyone. And, he's always wearing different shirts and every time he wears something, he always gets posted. So I've always known for the longest time that he loves not only vintage, but he's just he appreciates music. Like he's been in that scene for such a long period of time now. That when he came, I was like, I really want to try and get a shirt to him because I know how much he appreciates them. I know he's got a crazy collection for them. So I was like, I would love to try and figure out a way to get something to him. And it was just all about timing. Ended up pretty much getting in contact with someone that he was touring with at the time. And I basically just said, hey, look, like I'm based in Melbourne. I've got, I know he's a huge collector. I'd love to drop off some teas to him. And then, went through a few different people. And pretty much I said, yeah, like he would love to. Sounds like a plan, like come through. So then I was like, oh, is this actually happening? Like it was really, it was really, really strange. But like packed a suitcase full of t-shirts, got to Rod Laver. He's like, yep, there's tickets for you guys at the wheel call. Went, sure enough, there was a tickets for us. Then he said, meet us around here. Went to like the back gate, took us through the security entrance, and walked us through like the bottom of the stadium. And then we go out into this big room and I just see like 3 dressing room, Travis, Mark, and Tom. And I was like, she's like just very strange. Like it just felt so
surreal.
It's just really strange. Like even like clocking back, I'm losing myself thinking about it.
Yeah.
But was basically just backstage. They were all there, just hanging out, taking photos, talking to people. And then Travis just came over, started chatting, went through the teas, and he was just like, "Oh my god!" Like, I'm trying to think of specific stories now. I've got lost in the conversation.
What's your mentality going into something like that? Like, in terms of that suitcase, like how were you deciding what to put in the suitcase? Were you kind of looking at stuff he's already into, maybe watching an interview to find out which artists or bands he likes? Like how are you curating that suitcase so that you're taking him stuff that he wants?
Well, I just thought I'd take an array, basically everything, a variety of sizes. Because like majority of the stuff I see he wears is like pretty oversized. I know he doesn't usually like a lot of color. It's mainly sort of like monotone, black and white. So I sort of just went through what I had at the time. And because it was a sort of quick thing, it wasn't like I didn't have like a week's notice or something. It was sort of like a one-day turnaround. I was sort of like, okay, like what do I think he would like? I know he loves punk, so like I was going through finding all the punk stuff that I had. Obviously, like some cool metal bands. I wanted to find some more like some niche things that maybe he hadn't seen. And then I threw in like a mix of Australian specific things because I thought, it'd be cool if him to come to Australia and take home with him an Australian souvenir. So it was just a real mix of sort of everything, to be honest. I probably took maybe like 80 shirts. I think it might have been like folded up in a suitcase. And he went through and I sort of got an understanding, like based off our conversation and stuff, what he did and what he didn't like. And then that sort of fed into, he loved the shirts. We chatted for a bit and he's like, all right, so I've got to go do my warm up and stuff. Like, it's great to meet you. And then, basically got invited to go back the second night. And then I obviously had a better understanding of like what he liked pretty much. So it made it easier for me to sort of pick out teas and stuff in there. And then went the second night again, like just such a nice guy as well. But, went through teas, picked out more teas he liked, got those. And then same thing pretty much on the third night, invited me to come back again, same process, went and got the tickets, went past, the back door, opened up the suitcase again. And sort of at that point, a lot of the people that he was touring with as well were getting shirts. So, it was a great experience. Like it was a lot of fun. It was something that I honestly, if you'd told me when I sort of started in the vintage scene, that's what I would be doing, going from just cataloging what I was collecting, to then, selling shirts to fund the shirts that I bought to then to that extent, like it still is very surreal to think about.
That's a crazy
like even when I talk about it, I'm like, it doesn't seem real. Like it's really strange, but it's become very normal now. Like I really enjoy the sourcing for people. Just like even when people just hit me up saying, hey, like I'm really looking for this shirt, like I'd love to, if you've got anything similar. I love that process. No matter what the shirt is, no matter who the person is, I love being able to get people what they want. Like we spoke about it earlier. Like if people have a shirt, have something they're attached to, I love to be able to facilitate that. No matter what the setting is, no matter if it's an expensive shirt, a cheap shirt, whatever it is, I love to be able to do that. So that's what it sort of comes down to, is helping people, get those pieces of their collections, find their grails. That's what I enjoy most about it. So this was just, another version of that basically.
Yeah. So I guess what are some tips you have for sourcing vintage? First off, as like a buyer buying for yourself, like, do I go on eBay? Do I go on Grail? Do I find a vintage page? Like, what are some tips for sourcing vintage for myself that, stuff that I want to wear?
It's a good question. And it depends if you're wanting to buy things personal, it's very different to selling online. Like to buy to sell online.
Yes.
Because like when I was looking for the Queen things, like the Queen shirts during COVID, a lot of the buying that I was doing, that was the price tag, not necessarily it didn't matter, but I wasn't buying to then flip. So the margin factor was irrelevant because I didn't need to have any margin on it basically because I was buying it to keep for myself. So if you're wanting to buy things and you don't want to resell it, there's a lot of great platforms out there. It's hard on Instagram to find specific items, obviously, because you can't really search. You just sort of have to follow the right people and know who sells what. Like, there was a period of time where I knew if I wanted any Australian shirts, you were the man to go to because I was like, you're going to know where they are.
Yeah.
That was your specialty, so I'll go to.
I'll keep you posted on that, sir.
Yeah. Oh, there. Okay. So it's just knowing who to go to, basically. So if you're in the scene for a while, you'll know certain people. Like there's certain pages that post surf stuff. So if you ever want any vintage surf stuff, you go there. You'll know, there's people that specialize in Mambo, for example. They're the ones you go for Mambo for sportswear. So you know the people who sell what, who specialize in what. So if you're going from a pure buying point of view, that would be the best way to do it. And then obviously using the platforms like eBay and eBay, Depop, Etsy, Grailed even as well. Grailed, you usually don't find as many steals.
Yeah.
But there's always ways out there. Marketplace obviously is one that people use now. It's a lot more back and forth, and I'm not the biggest fan of like their searching mechanisms and how you find things. But that's another way to do things. In terms of sourcing to sell, I'm in a very fortunate position now where I think a lot of people are familiar with the page, and a lot of people over time, sort of going back to that building trust and building a brand. A lot of people that want to offload large collections, they come to me because they've either dealt with me in the past, and for me, the easiest way to conduct myself is being as transparent as possible when it comes to buying, because the last thing you want is people to feel as though they've been ripped off. So whenever people come to me to sell stuff, I always say, this is what I'm going to sell it for. This is what I can pay you, basically. Because then straight up they know, okay, he needs to make a margin. This is how much of a margin he's asking. That's fair. It leaves them to assess whether they're happy with that or not. And that has been the source of a lot of repeat business, basically. The way I look at it, it's a long race. It's not a short come up. If you can pay $50 for a tee and make $300, wow, that person's never going to come to you again because you've just burnt them. They feel like they've been scammed, basically. So for me, it's 100%. A long game. Like, I'm more than happy to pay up on things because I know people will continue to come. And like, if I can put money in their pocket and it never puts money into my pocket, it's a win-win situation. So I try pay up as much as I possibly can so people feel like they got a fair deal. So then I can sell it. And then next time they have a shirt, they go, oh, Alexander, it was super easy to deal with last time. I'm just going to go to him again because it's an easy process. So I've been very lucky. Since COVID, when the market has sort of dropped a bit, a lot of people have wanted to sell me stuff, like a lot of sellers, because I think certain things are a little bit hard to move today comparatively to years ago. So like a lot of people, if they're digging through salvo stores and op shops and they're able to find their pieces for cheap, they can still sell it to me and I can still put my margin on it and they're happy because it's money in their pocket and it saves them listing on eBay, listing on Depop, having to post things.
Fast too.
100%, 100%. Yeah. No, you're spot on. So it's more the convenience. I try to sell convenience, and I think if you focus on the repeated customer, it works out so much better than just the short term. Like, oh, this is a $500 t-shirt. If I can get it for $50, I'll make heaps of money. It's like, well, no, like you could potentially buy $5,000 worth of t-shirt from this person over a longer duration. You're way better off doing that than just getting one t-shirt. Like, it's a very short-sighted perspective if that's how people go about their business. So I try and offer the best service, pay as much as I possibly can, because repeat business is the most important thing to me.
I think that has always been something that you and I have been on the same page on, which is this idea of long-term brand. Can you speak more on how you reach that point where you're like, okay, sneakers aren't doing it for me because people are just playing this short-term game. Let me shift into vintage. Okay, now I'm going to play the long game. Like, where did that even come from for you? Were you always thinking about brand once you kind of had started, or was it something that you were just like, you know what, I'm just going to do the right thing by people? Like, how did you get to that mentality?
It's a good question. I think in terms of sneakers, it was always a brand because you're always selling on Facebook.
Yeah,
that was where you would sell. Like StockX was around in time. It was very, very early, sort of, to be honest, sort of before StockX and as StockX started. But selling was all through Facebook. So if you had one bad transaction with someone, they would just call you out and that was it. Like you would never sell again. So it was always, okay, if I'm selling something, like I'm going to double box the shoes, I'm going to make sure I send them tracking like the same day or the next day. Like I need to be on the ball. So I think I've always just, whatever principles I took with the sneakers, I took sort of straight into the vintage.
Yeah.
Because a brand is the most important thing. If you want to build something over a duration of time, you don't want to burn people along the way. You know, if customers aren't happy, all you need to do is, okay, how can I fix this? How can I make this experience a positive experience? You know, and I pride myself on that. You know, that's why, you know, implementing measurements, something as simple as that, you know, on the website, I was like, okay, this is perfect. People know exactly what the fit is. It gives people more information, and just being as transparent as possible.
Yeah.
And building that brand over time, building that trust is the most important thing. Because when it got to the point, like the Nirvana drop, when I was selling shirts for crazy amounts of money, you're not going to buy a shirt from a no-name, not to say no-name, but like a brand new page where there's no feedback, there's no references.
It's risk.
100%, 100%. You would like, if I saw a shirt for $1,000, let's say on a brand new page, or someone selling for $1,200, but I know that person, I'm way more likely to buy from the $1,200 person, because it's $200 more, but the risk factor is just dramatically reduced.
Yeah, you can lose $1,000.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So it's just always been on focusing on the long game. If you have the long game in mind, and just every single transaction you treat as though it's the most important thing, you need to get to the bottom of it, make every single interaction as good as it can possibly be. That's the mindset you sort of have to have. Like, even when people message you, just like, I get messages all the time, how much is this? Like, someone that I've never interacted with, I'll send me a message like, how much is this? And they'll send me a shirt. They don't follow me or anything.
Yeah.
You know, there's some pages that'll be like, ignore, they might have been shared to their story, like, stop sending messages like this. I know at a certain period of time, I didn't know how much things are worth. So it's always like, hey mate, thanks for reaching out. This is my opinion. This is what I would do. However, you know, depending on these, it could factor this way. So always just trying to be as professional as possible and giving the end user the best experience as possible, because over time it's going to build that trust. That trust can just, it opens doors. You'd be surprised at, if you played a long game, and sort of last year was
well, you're the example of it. Exactly.
Just how many opportunities it opens up. Yeah. It opens doors.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you just focus on the long game, everything will be okay.
100%.
Everything will be okay.
And that's why I think you and I have always got along, is just that understanding that, like, this isn't just one transaction. This isn't just one drop. Like, we are building catalogs and we're building proof of work over a long enough time period that it then becomes undeniable, and you can do those, you know, more advanced moves where you are, you know, sourcing direct from people who want to sell to you to begin with.
100%.
So
100%.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference. Just that perspective, that mentality shift, focusing on the long term rather than short term. And that's just that's not just with business, that's with life in general.
100%.
Focus on the long term and you'll always come off better, for sure.
100%. So I guess my question is, have you ever made a mistake with a customer order, and how did you fix it?
It's a good question. I've prided myself on not really having many returns or anything like that. Like, I try to give as much detail as possible in terms of, especially when it comes to flaws, and things like that. Again, being as transparent as possible. I can't think of many instances,
if you don't have
to be
one,
honest.
I actually have one for you. I have one.
I was going to say, I've got two examples of things that I think. One, I sent a shirt out once and I hadn't noticed, but the side of the shirt had been, an additional seam was added. So they basically, the shirt was like, it was folded in and sewn like that, and was done so perfect that I didn't even notice. So I sent the shirt out, and again, the measurements were taken based off the shirt having been, you know, taken in. And someone reached out to me and said, hey, like, you never mentioned the shirt was altered. And I said, in what way? Like, they sent me photos, like, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry, completely missed that. And I basically just said to him, look, I'm happy to give you a full refund and, you know, pay a label basically, to send it back. Or I'm happy to, you know, refund you 20% of the order. And I think they went down the route of 20% of the order because, again, it didn't affect the...
They still wanted the
It didn't affect the fit. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
But that was one that slipped through. And even to this day, I don't know how, because all the photos, like, they're washed, they're done inside out. So, like, my hands touched the tees quite a bit. So I'm not sure how that was missed. But that was one. I'm pretty sure a while back, I had a shirt I sold. I bought a shirt. I bought a shirt off a guy that was dry rot. I bought it, but this is a long time ago now. I bought a shirt off a guy. It arrived to me and I went away on holiday and I didn't check the shirt. And then I basically had washed it and I'd put it on the rack. And then when it came to a drop time, I pulled the shirt out, doing photos and stuff. And I noticed like a rip and I was like, oh,
That's not right.
that's not right. Like that looks like a dry rot rip.
Yeah.
And I ripped it and I was like, oh my God, this is dry rot. So that was like a real shit. Like this was a mistake early on. Like I should have picked this up.
And sorry, can I just interrupt? For anybody who doesn't know what dry rot is, can you just explain that, please?
Yeah, well, from my understanding, I think people have a lot of I just remembered something. I'm going to come back to this.
Yes.
So shirts, basically. So the story I've been told, I've heard of numerous things, but what it comes back to is a shirt. Basically, back in the day when they made the shirts, they used an acid-based dye. And when the shirts were made, if they were never washed or treated in any way, shape, or form, the acidity levels in the shirt would increase and it would basically not eat away at the fibers, it would make them very delicate. And you could pretty much, if you have a real dry rot shirt, you can pick it up and basically just tear it and it will just pull apart. And there's varying levels to dry rot. Some of them, some shirts can be dry rot and be incredibly wearable. You can wear them, wash them, no problems at all. But then there's other ones that you can see it as soon as you get it. You can lift it up. It's got like a sort of plastic. It's got a shimmer. Yeah.
It's not good.
And it just tears like tissue paper. So that's basically what dry rot is, and it's something that I think in the last few years has become a lot more. As people get an understanding about it, it becomes a lot easier to deal with because I think really early days, not many people, not they knew about dry rot, but it wasn't something that people did. So for 2018, 2019 maybe, people wouldn't check their shirts for dry rot. So I would buy shirts and it would arrive and like people say it's a brand new dead stock shirt. I'm like, oh, amazing. And then it would get here and it would just rip because it was a dry rot shirt. And there's been times over the years when I've had shirts come in and if I hadn't have done the dry rot test, you would have just never known because they look like brand new tees. They're faded, they're worn. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So there's been instances over time. There's specific blanks that sort of tear probably easier in terms of if they've never been watched. There's certain blanks where you're like, okay, if this is dead stock, there's a good chance that it's dry rot. Yeah, like there's a batch of those TSP tags, those TSP blanks that if you never, like there's a bunch of Silverchair ones made, if they were never washed, high likelihood that they're dry rot. Whereas, yeah, exactly right. Whereas, some of like the Brockham ones, for example, I haven't really had any issues with dry rot on Brockham blanks.
Yeah.
And it could just be the shirts I've bought, potentially they could. But I think it basically comes down to the shirt, how it was made, pretty much the acidity levels over time.
Yeah.
So basically the process is now, and it has been for years, as soon as a shirt comes in, it's always basically testing it in multiple areas. Which leads me into my next story. Well, because I used to always just test the shirt from the sleeve.
Yeah. So how are you testing it? Yeah.
Well, now I do the sleeve, the hem, and like just a random part of the shirt. Because ages ago, I don't know if you remember, but this would have maybe been 4 years ago back in the day. I had this unreal whole shirt. It was a really nice, it was a 97
This
whole
is why
shirt. Yeah.
we're going full circle with this story.
Yeah. And it was a shirt that I think you and I ended up trading for a Halo. I think it was a Halo tee I got off you.
It was a Halo tee.
So I wanted this Halo tee, sent you this whole shirt, and then it turns out the shirt was dry rot. And it was one of those ones where it was really worn. It looked it looked really nice.
Looks great.
Yeah. And the test on the sleeve didn't cut it. So then after that, I think you'd message me like, hey, you think the shirt's dry rot? And then after that, every shirt now, it's like 2, 3, 4 different areas because I've had shirts where you can test a sleeve. That was an example. You can test a sleeve. You rip it, doesn't go. You try the other sleeve or, a sort of different area in that same region and the fabric can go. So it doesn't necessarily have to affect the whole shirt. It's obviously very rare. Usually it does. But now it's just very thorough. So it's both sleeves, the hem, other side of the hem, testing the collar as well. So, because it's something that gets a lot of people, and especially I'm finding if I'm buying from people who went to the shows back in the day, like, I bought 2 of every shirt, one's worn, one's brand new.
And it's like, but did you watch the other one?
Yeah, exactly right. And then they're like, what do you mean? What's dry rot? Like that doesn't make sense. It's brand new. It's got no issues or anything. But it's become more of a thing now that people know about and people are happy to check. You don't really get many people trying to get away with it. There's probably still people out there trying to. But yeah, it goes back to building trust, building a brand,
Yeah, but
making
like,
sure
why
you sort
would
of
you?
stand by the product.
Yeah, 100%.
People
100%.
do it, man. People, like, there's been people even in Australia that
Yeah.
had pages that just scammed a bunch of people and darked. Like,
Yeah,
it happens. Like, it's crazy, but it does
Yeah.
happen.
yeah. Unfortunately. Okay,
Mm.
well, I guess I thought this might be a good segue to like your thoughts on where the market is now and the vintage market as a whole.
Mhm.
What is the most expensive t-shirt sale you've seen so far? And do you think it was worth it? Whether it was like during peak time, whether it was recently, what's the most expensive one? And do you think, it was worth it?
I think there's two that come to mind. I think the first one that probably everyone thinks of is the Aladdin genie all over print.
That was
that's sold.
like a top signal.
Crazy. Yeah, I think that's probably
Yeah.
the first one that comes to people's mind because it was so publicized. Like, there was, I think they did like a Wall Street Journal in America article about it, how vintage was becoming this crazy thing. The shirt sold for $6,000 US at the time. So that, and then also there was a Mona Lisa Fuji's wrap tee. I remember sold like a little while later, but that was again around that price. And that's not to say there's shirts that haven't sold for more, because I know there would. I think there was like a mask all over print that sold back in the day for a lot more than that as well. I've heard of things selling for $10,000, but in terms of visible sales that I've actually seen,
that you've seen,
those are probably the two that come to mind. And again, going back to timing and just everything being perfect, that was a time when COVID was happening. People were watching lives constantly. And everyone was trying to top each other, auctioning one Nirvana shirt. And then it was like, this guy's auctioning 3 Nirvana shirts. And it was like, this guy's auctioning 10 rap tees. Like, everyone, this guy's starting at $1. Like, it was always just like
one-upping each other.
Who can do better.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So that was sort of like a perfect storm of, Disney was going crazy. Like, most people remember during COVID when Disney tees just went insane. It was an all over print as well. It was on the biggest live platform at the time as well. So that was sort of the perfect storm. In terms of, do I think it was worth that money?
Yeah.
Who am I to say? It's only what people are worth buying. There's expensive watches. What's the difference between a $50 Swatch watch and a $5,000, you have to write a $20,000 Rolex. They do the same thing, but there's so many other factors that play into it. So, for me, I would never spend $6,000 on an Aladdin tee because it doesn't do anything for me. But for a Disney collector that grew up watching that movie, that, needed that to finish in the collection, $6,000 doesn't sound that bad to tick something off the box and never have to worry about it again. You know what I mean? So it's all about the situation. I guarantee you, I buy things every single day that people are like, that is crazy. Like, if you took a random person off the street and you said, okay, this shirt, how much do you reckon it's worth? Let's say it's like even like $150 shirt. People are like, $150, it's a used t-shirt. Like, it's got stains on it, it's got holes in it. No way. So it all sits on a scale somewhere. To someone, if the value's there, it's there. You know what I mean? Like, who am I to say it's worth that? It's worth what someone's willing to pay. That's the way I see it. So if someone to pay $6,000, someone to pay $10,000, $20,000. So you see some of these vintage Levi pieces, the sort of money they go for. I would never spend that money on it, but there's people that are willing to. So therefore, that's what it's worth. Who am I to tell those people that it's not worth that?
So maybe there's somebody who's going to listen to this and they don't understand where vintage gets its pricing from. Do you mind explaining how vintage pricing actually works? Like, why would people pay $1,000 for a t-shirt when they could get one that looks almost identical for like $20?
It's an interesting question. I think there's multiple factors, and I think depending on the people you speak to, you'll get a different answer. But if we start at a pure product level, there's no doubt in my head, if we talk about quality, the quality of the shirts, the vintage shirts that we're trading, it's tenfold on any of the shirts you're buying in store today. Like, if you go to Cotton On, back in the day, if you went to just your local record store and bought a shirt, and you traveled into the future now into 2025, and you bought a shirt someone picked up off the rack from from anywhere, from Cotton On, for example. That's the example I think people usually go to. If you compare those shirts, they're miles apart. The old blanks are just so much better. The construction of the shirts, everything about them is tenfold better, right? So if we're talking from a quality point of view, they win in terms of quality. But does quality justify a 10x price tag change? Probably not. But I think it goes back to that sentimental value. I think shirts are these tangible artifacts or these tangible items that have traveled through years and years and years. And I think when you get down to worn band tees in particular, you know, the wear of a shirt, you can't replicate that. You can try fade shirts, you can try just dress them, but those old shirts, there's something about them. It's not something that I can really put into words. There's a feeling about them, or I guess it's because I'm passionate about them. But they're collectibles. People want these things from their childhood. People want things that take them back to a time that, you know, a fond memory. For me, it was Queen shirts for a long period of time. For me, it was Mask shirts for a long period of time. You know, that connected me to when I was a kid. I loved that movie. And yeah, I could have just gone on eBay and bought a $20 Mask shirt. But to be like, no, this was actually from that era. This was made in 1994. Like, there's something special about that. You can't replicate that. Eye to eye, yes, it's probably the exact same thing. But in terms of the story behind it, and just the value that it holds to a lot of us, you can't put a price tag on that. And I think that's why people are willing to spend money on it. And, you know, I think a good example is like a vintage Rolex. A vintage Rolex, like some of those old models are really expensive, but I'm sure a new Rolex probably does better in terms of timekeeping than what the old one would. But it's that sentimental value, the prestige of it, the history behind it. Same with old cars. You know, the cars we have now are incredible. You can go and get a high-tech, high-spec car that's got all the technologies, the
Doesn't
cameras,
need fuel.
Self-drive, exactly right.
Yeah,
Drives itself.
self-driving. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you go and you get like a 20-year-old, I don't know, Mercedes, and that's a lot more expensive than, you know, some of the modern day cars. So I think it's all about collecting in general. People find value in things that have some sort of, you know, sentimental value or some sort of attachment to them.
Yeah.
So in terms of why things are expensive, there's not a definitive answer. I don't think it's based off quality. I don't think it's based off, you know, one specific thing. I think it's an accumulation of everything. And for me, like I said, these shirts are a tangible thing that connect us back to the past, to times where, you know, I wasn't around when Queen was around. So I can listen to the records and I can watch the shows and I can see them tour now when they're a lot older. But, you know, in terms of having something to directly connect me back, you know, a shirt for me is like one of the best ways to do it. Like it lived that era. It's from there. It's now, like, it's tangible. It's something you can feel. It's something you can wear. So there's so many things. I can go on forever about it, but there's so many little factors that go into the pricing and why things, you know, why a Red Hot Chili Peppers, for example, shirt at the moment is crazy expensive, and a Nirvana shirt, whereas a U2 shirt, you know, same era, you know, that were really popular as well, just doesn't hold that same value. So there's a lot of different things. Sometimes the market plays into it. You know, I think it's very easy for things to get hyped up. We saw that a lot over the last few years. But it's very easy for price to be influenced by a variety of things. But yeah, there's not one definite thing. It's a lot. It's a lot.
So how has the vintage market evolved over the last 5 years, in your opinion, and where do you see it heading?
Again, a really good question. If I had a mystic ball, it would be amazing, because I could, you know, get on all the trends before they happen.
Accumulate, then drop it right.
Exactly right. Exactly right. But it goes back to timing. Like I said before, you know, those Carhartt jackets a long time ago, I bought them all for like I was probably paying maybe $80 for something to get them shipped from the States. And I tried to sell them for $150 and no one would buy them. Whereas now you can't buy Carhartt jackets for like under $250.
Yeah.
So it's all about timing. But in terms of, sorry, my throat's getting dry now.
You're good, man. You're good.
In terms of the market and where it's going, it's changed a lot recently, to be honest. Obviously, COVID was a huge peak. We had a huge growth throughout COVID. A lot of prices just went crazy. A lot of attention was on the scene, which was great. From a selling perspective, it was great. From a buying perspective, made things obviously a lot harder. But in terms of, you know, things demanding a really high price, there was, you know, a lot of growth there. I think after COVID, when people sort of came back to reality, when the checks weren't going out to everyone anymore, the market obviously dropped. There was definitely a clear peak and then it sort of tapered off. But surprisingly, in the last year and a bit, it's really started to pick back up. And I think more so for the higher ticket items as well. I think back in the day, sort of those shirts for like between maybe $75 and $150 would just move like that for me. Whereas now it's sort of a little bit harder to move those, whereas the more expensive shirts are sort of what are moving easier. Like sometimes it's easier to sell a $350 shirt comparable to like a $125 shirt.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I really don't know, to be honest. I think people naturally, whenever you get into something, your palate for spending money sort of increases. Like I
Yeah,
know
it's like
for me,
it
when I
warms up.
started,
It warms up.
yeah, 100%, 100%. Like when I started buying t-shirts, like for me, if I bought a t-shirt for $50, I was like, shit, that's expensive. Like for a t-shirt, it's an old t-shirt. And then I bought a $200 Queen tee.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, this
Well,
is
that's now
it's
it's
getting up there
hectic.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, your taste naturally over time. And now, like, I buy shirts all the time and I don't blink, whereas I used to blink. And that's not to say that, it's because I have all this money. It's not true at all. It's just because over time, you naturally feel more comfortable in the space. You feel more comfortable buying. Like it's very easy. You know, people that get into card collecting, it's the exact same thing. You start buying cheap packs. You're like, oh, I really want that PSA this. You start buying Pokemon cards and you just naturally evolve. Same with watches, same with cars. Over time, the more time you spend in a space and you feel more knowledgeable, more comfortable you feel spending money and putting money behind things because you have that knowledge. You know there's value there.
Yeah.
So it's something that happens naturally over time. And I think COVID obviously pushed it really hard. We're obviously in a real big bubble. That pop just sort of came to a more reasonable level, which I think was really good for a long period of time. And now I think it's sort of increasing again, to be honest. Like I'm seeing, you know, a lot of Nirvana price is still really high. You know, Red Hot Chili Peppers is just going through the roof. But then, you know, you have fluctuations. Cradle of Filth stuff used to sell for crazy money. Cannibal Corpse, that's sort of tapered down as of recently, for me at least. And because it's a worldwide market, some countries, some sort of genres in particular go crazy. Like a lot of the old British bands, like it's just like gone up like crazy. Australian stuff went up for a bit. It's sort of tapered down a little bit now. So it all sort of, there's no way to predict what's going to increase or when it's going to increase. Certain, I guess, pop culture, certain, you know, moments in culture, I guess, affect things. There's big impacts when certain people wear t-shirts. That can sort of spike a t-shirt, or, you know, when artists pass away or things like that, they obviously affect the prices. But there's a lot of things that impact it. It's not
just one thing. It's never just one thing.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. I think it's going up, to be honest, from what I'm seeing at the moment. But, you know, I could go on tomorrow and no one cares about vintage t-shirts anymore. Yeah. Like it's very touch and go, I guess, but
well,
I still love it.
On that note, then, if you're willing to give the game up, what do you think are some underrated vintage t-shirts right now that you think will go up in value?
That's a great question. There's a lot of bands that I always say, I don't know why this doesn't sell for more. That's hard because there's a lot of things that I think, for like even U2, for example, U2, Bon Jovi, like they sort of get clowned on a little bit. But like, I still think some of the old Bon Jovi tees, some of the old U2 stuff is crazy. I love them.
Yeah.
I think they're really good prints. Obviously, you know, huge, you know, in their respective eras. But they just don't sell for much money. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about this. Kiss shirts as well. Like Kiss were a huge band. The graphics are always loud and colorful. And you would think on paper, huge band, hits, worldwide tours, like you would think that would mean expensive, but it doesn't translate. It's really strange. You know, a 1998 Kiss t-shirt that's got a crazy loud graphic.
Yeah.
Might only sell for $75. And then you go a 1998 Rage Against the Machine shirt from that same era might sell for $500-$600 with a more simple graphic.
That gap? So yeah.
I honestly can't tell you. I don't know if it's because they toured more. I don't know what it is. But I really appreciate the art in shirts. I really appreciate graphics. You know, I've got some shirts in my collection that are very simple. Like I said before, no one would even want to spend $20, $30 on them. But for me, I'm like, this is a crazy shirt. Like this should be comparable to like a $250 tee. But it's really what people are worth, what people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get to.
Absolutely.
That's what it comes down to. That's where the value is.
So I guess if you could create a stock market for vintage t-shirts, what would be like your blue chips? Your ones that you think are either going to stay the same value or keep going up?
Yeah.
Besides Nirvana.
Okay, well, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to say Nirvana. Nirvana's always been, from the start to finish, although the prices have fluctuated, there's been consistent growth with Nirvana. In recent years, Red Hot Chili Peppers, I'd say probably in the last year, Red Hot Chili Peppers just shot up like crazy. Like to the point where I remember I had a drop and I had a 1 hot minute, you know, the Porsche with all four of them on the front.
Yeah.
I had that shirt. I think I sold it for $350. I did a drop like 3 months later, and I think I sold that shirt for $800.
Unreal.
Like, so it can just change so quickly.
So
Wrap
what
tees,
do you know what drove that, or
nothing. Honestly, no idea. No
Okay.
idea. Just buying habits change. People just want Red Hot Chili Pepper stuff.
Yeah.
And the Red Hot Chili Pepper tees are great. I've been collecting for a really long time. Like
Yeah.
you can see here, I've got a really good collection of Red Hot Chili Pepper stuff. Because they're a band that I've seen. I loved. I went and saw them twice.
Yeah.
Or not last year, the year before when they came here. I went to both shows. They were amazing. I love Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I'd been buying these shirts for a really long time, and then just all of a sudden they just spiked out of nowhere. They could have been something that created that spike. Maybe someone wore them. I'm not sure. But it happens a lot. But in terms of the most consistent, you've always sort of got those more, not niche, but I feel like grunge. So let me get to this first. I feel like grunge in general, a lot of the old grunge bands are always really, really popular. They always do really, really well. Rap tees, rap tees were really good for a long period of time. They would have been a blue chip stock that I would have said, but rap tees recently have dropped a lot. Like, I remember back in the day, you couldn't buy a 2-pack rap tee for under $1,000.
Yeah.
And now there's one sitting for like $500-$600. Like, it's a real different market. Same with mosquito heads. During COVID, mosquito heads went crazy. They were selling for thousands of dollars, and now it's really hard to sell mosquito heads. I had a Marlon Brando mosquito head on the website that, if I'd put it up 2 years earlier, I would have sold probably 3 times as much as I sold it for. So it's really hard. It's really hard. There's some band, like Oasis has always stayed consistently strong. Oasis always does really well. In recent years, Ride shirts have gone just like crazy through the roof. I feel like Metallica, Guns N' Roses have stayed consistent. Like they're always sort of around that 150, 250, 300 mark. They haven't shot up. They haven't dropped. They always stay sort of consistent. So if you're looking for consistency, they're always something that sort of stays there. And then, Rage Against the Machines recently have gone crazy. Just trying to think that it fluctuates so quickly. Like I can be pricing shirts. There's been instances where someone, actually, a good example is during that time when Red Hot Chili Peppers went up like crazy, someone had reached out to me with a Red Hot Chili Pepper shirt. To me, I was like, it's probably a $400 or $500 shirt. It was a long sale, like probably $400 or $500 shirt. He's like, oh, okay, interesting. He's like, oh, I might pass. Like I've had someone offer, like I think it was like $1,200. I was like, whoa, am I just like, am I not seeing the big picture here? Have I missed something? Like, because if you've got to offer for that money, like there's a difference between asking for that money and being like, oh no, someone's willing to pay this. And sure enough, they did, and they sold it. But like, that was just me, a change happening to the market, me not being, clued in on it.
Yeah.
And it can happen that quickly. And, obviously I spend so much time in this space, but there's still so much happening that so much gets by me. You know what I mean? Like shirts will rocket up and I don't notice. So as much as you try and keep on top of everything as much as you possibly can, it's impossible. And that's why I say every drop I'm learning, I'm always sort of bouncing off other sellers to get, information, get their thoughts. What do you think of this? Because we're constantly learning. At no point ever can you know everything when it comes to vintage. You're always learning, So, it's a process. It's a process.
Absolutely. So do you think social media and like what influence has social media and influencers had on the vintage scene, in your opinion? Whether it's celebrities buying, whether it is, someone that's really popular starting to wear more vintage, what do you think that's impacted the vintage scene?
I definitely think so. I think, there's certain people like Justin Bieber, I think was one of the first ones. Justin was huge in terms of the vintage tees for a long period of time around that sort of Fear of God era, when sneakers were still going crazy. He was always wearing different shirts. And I think that really started a trend because that's when you sort of saw tour merch become more popular, band tees become more popular. That's led into people like Travis Scott as well. Whatever Travis wears usually goes crazy expensive. So I think there's definitely been external influences. I think at the end of the day, people just naturally want to fit in. They want to do what other people are doing, whatever's trending. And not to say that that's a bad thing. I think some people see that as a negative thing. People try to copy trends to get into it. But, I'm more than happy for new people to, get into this sort of vintage community because once you're into it, there's so many different avenues you can go to, I feel like people get into here because potentially the hype and like, oh, this celebrity's wearing this celebrity's wearing this, and they might follow that. And they realize, oh, I can sort of translate that to something that I care about. And then they start buying shirts of bands that they like or something that is sentimental or means something to them. So I think there's definitely external influence, and I think it mainly comes from artists. I think they're probably the biggest people that push it. I don't really think, like influencers and things like that, probably in terms of style, it has some sort of impact. But I definitely think, when you're seeing your favorite celebrity wearing an old thrash band tee, you're probably like, oh, that's so cool. Like I want to try replicate that in my own way. And that's how more and more people get into the space. So I think it's a positive thing. I think anything that's going to bring eyes to the space and build, help people to get more knowledgeable about what we do, it can only be a positive thing.
Yeah.
So, I'm not of that mindset of people being like, name 3 songs. It's funny.
Name 3 Harley Davidson songs.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
It is funny, but like, I'm more than happy to people. Like when I wear a Cannibal Corpse shirt, I couldn't tell you 3 Cannibal Corpse. I could probably tell you albums because I know when I list the shirts.
Yeah.
But I think you can have an appreciation for things that you don't necessarily, you don't have to have listened to the band to be able to wear the band shirt. I think you can just appreciate the shirts for the art and for the graphic that they are. So I'm very open to people joining the space and, playing around with it, see what they like. I'm very open to that.
Absolutely. And when it comes to that, like the live shopping aspect, because it's been popping off overseas, we haven't yet seen, we obviously saw that massive spike during 2020, but we haven't seen it yet return. Do you think live shopping comes back and makes an impact on vintage?
To be honest, I think in America it's huge right now. There's a lot of live shows still. I think one limiting factor is probably time zones as well. COVID was easy because everyone was at home, right? Like you could sleep in. It didn't matter if you stayed up at 3 o'clock for a live, you could do that. Whereas people now have work. Like you can't constantly be watching live. So, sometimes I'll see a show that I'm really interested in. I'll stay up for it, no problems. But I think we're so far away in Australia, time zones don't really work for us. That's the one thing. Like every drop, I'll have at least 1 or 2 people saying, "Oh, I messed up my alarm clock. Like I set it for 3 o'clock. It was supposed to be 2 o'clock. Like I made the mistake." So I think we're so far removed from everything, and people view us as like just this distant cousin.
Distant cousin.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think we're somewhat removed from probably the core of it. And I think we probably don't have enough people in our own community to be able to like sustain our own sort of little economy and market. So it probably wouldn't be as impactful. But hey, like I said, things are changing every day. Something could come to the scene that just changes the complete dynamic of it. So as much as I think it's probably comparable to comparable to COVID. It wouldn't be as impactful. I could look like an idiot tomorrow when Instagram launched a new feature that integrates the buying factor, like something like whatever those platforms do, integrates that into Instagram, and that could be a turning point, and then no one cares about website drops anymore. Everyone's tuning in and buying through Instagram. So as much as I wish I had the answer, I would assume it wouldn't be as big here as it is overseas, but I could be wrong. And I've seen a lot of Australian people sell in those overseas lives and still do really well. So
we've just got to get up at the worst time.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And be willing to ship.
Puffy eyes. And, exactly right. And like people in the States, like I feel like Australians are very open to ship overseas. In the States, they hate sending stuff over here. The amount of times where people, I'm like, yep, I'm happy to buy this shirt. And like, oh, I don't want to ship it. I'm like, how much is shipping? Like, oh, it'll be like $30. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And they're like, nah, I prefer not to send it. Like there's a level of resistance that is really strange. I've never understood it.
Why do you think that exists?
I don't know. I really don't know. You do? I would love to hear them because I'm very confused. I don't know if it's a convenience thing or they don't 100%. Think it's safe. I don't know.
100%. I think it's, especially if you have, like from our perspective, right, there's certain teas that like we have to buy them from overseas. For them, they don't have to sell it overseas to sell it. They've got the customer base locally. So like if they have to do an extra step just to send it further away and then, and of course there is that element of like, okay, what if something goes wrong and there's a return or it gets lost, you know what I mean? So it's probably that as well. But yeah, I've definitely encountered that resistance as well. And I guess the solution that I would offer up for that is to just have like an American friend and get it sent to them and then get your trusty friend to send it to you. Done. Good to go.
Yeah, it's easy nowadays. You got things like Ship It To, Ozpost. I can't think of the Ozpost one where, they'll take your parcels and they'll send them off for you. So there's definitely ways around it, but definitely resistance sending things overseas to us for sure.
So if you could change one thing about the vintage t-shirt scene, what would it be?
Change one thing.
It's one thing.
I'm not the biggest fan when people call out each other for their views on certain things. I don't really like it when I see sellers be like, this shirt is not worth this. Like, this is a stupid asking price. Like, I feel like everyone can have their opinion, but I don't like, not the negativity, but I think sometimes people post things that are unnecessary to cause drama or to cause, tension, or I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think calling people out for, bad business.
That's fine. I think that's
sometimes,
fine.
I think that's justifiable.
Yeah.
I think people need to know if certain people are scamming or if people are doing things dodgy. No problems with that. But
when it's like, this t-shirt's not worth this, it's like, it has nothing to do with it.
It's like, okay, like if you're not going to buy it, just
you're not
keep
the
going.
buyer.
Like, it's,
like you're not the
exactly
target
right.
customer. You're not the target audience.
Yeah,
so
exactly right. Like I had a lot of people commenting that for a long period of time, as a lot of other pages would have for a long, before vintage was as big as it is now, people being like, this shirt is not worth $200. I could go buy a shirt for $50. So mate, if you can find that shirt for $50, I'll buy that shirt off you for $100. Like, please. But that's probably all it would be. Yeah. I think outside of that, everyone's pretty respectful. I think people encourage each other. I think people like to see people succeed because although it's a competitive market, you would think that people selling, I feel like any market where people are selling similar items, there's probably some sort of competition, but I don't feel any competition in this space. I feel like anytime I see someone with a crazy shirt sell for crazy money, I'm like, good, that's great. Well, like I'm happy for them. But whereas I feel like in a lot of other spaces, people wouldn't have that mindset. But I feel like if I sell something for a crazy price or I found a crazy piece, people are always really like, wow, unreal, man. Like, so happy to see this. You know what I mean? Like everyone's very positive, which I really like about the space. Yeah. And again, differed heavily from the sneaker community, which was, a long time ago now, but everyone's super positive. Everyone wants to see each other, sort of pages grow. It's getting harder and harder to grow on Instagram now, but people are always wanting to see each other push. So I really like that.
Yeah. And I think there is that element of like, if the rising tides, it's raising all the ships. So,
100%,
so if someone sets
100%.
a precedent of selling this type of shirt for this amount, it's like that is setting the precedent for you to then be able to sell something similar at that price too. Like it's good.
Yeah.
So
100%.
in that element, like all their sellers are on the same page.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess we're kind of in the last section / the second last section. I thought we would just focus on like free game, helping, help out younger sellers, newer sellers, maybe people that are curious, or maybe even just like appeal to business owners as well. I thought we'd do something different. So Warren Buffett's right-hand man, his name's Charlie Munger, might know him. He always said this thing called, he always said, always invert, meaning like always turn things upside down. Right. So we'll do an inversion exercise. So my question is to you.
I like this.
This will be interesting. If I wanted to guarantee that I absolutely failed selling vintage, what would you have me do? 5 steps to failing as a vintage seller.
Wow. 5 steps to fail as a vintage seller.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I've never thought about this before.
It's interesting. It's interesting what it conjures up, because then you're like, oh, okay, those are the things that I should definitely not be doing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I would say...
So you need to guarantee that I fail. Tomorrow I'm starting, Alex. You need to 5 steps to guarantee that I fail. Nothing happens for me.
Okay, I'd say the biggest thing would be selling shirts and then sending them in just condition comparable, not at all. I've had the instances where I buy a shirt and it comes to me and it's ripped. Yeah. Not necessarily dry rot, because like we said before, that can slip through the cracks. People can make that mistake. No problem. But like I've had people sell me shirts and they've intentionally covered up the fact that all the pits are ripped.
Okay. So number one, make sure it's like, make sure I tell you it's one thing and then send you something completely different.
Yes. Okay. So don't try to skew from your description as far as possible.
Okay. Awesome. All right.
100%.
All right. Second thing.
Second thing I would say is taking ages to ship shirts.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I buy a shirt from you today, and then one thing I hate is people like, I'll buy a shirt like, hey, amazing, I'll get it sent out for you. By the way, I'm going on holidays for 3 months in an hour. Yeah. As soon as I get back, I'll send you the shirt. I'm like, you couldn't have, like, you've waited for me to send the money before telling me that. So being really sloppy with shipping times, that's something I'd say as well. Because again, always goes back to, building that brand, building the reputation. So having a terrible reputation for shipping, definitely, I would say that as well.
Yes.
Third, What? Oh, this is hard. This is very, very hard. Um,
Take your time.
do you have
It's all
any
good.
suggestions that you can pitch to me? Anything that sort
Okay,
of
so well, first,
come to
so,
mind for
so
you?
first we've got misrepresent the item. Second
Yep,
is take
100%.
ages to ship.
Oh, I got a third one.
Okay.
Sort of under misrepresent the item, but not as bad. I would say masking what you're selling, because I've seen people that will have later prints or reprints, and they try
Pass it off as
like
something
they'll
else.
they'll cut the tag, or I've seen people like sand down the
So
licensing
alter
date.
your
If
items.
like on no tab, alter your items. Yes, yeah. So try pass them off. Yeah, definitely alter your items. That would be another one, because again, that's misleading.
Got two more. It does get harder
Two
the further
more.
you go, but it's just like, it's an interesting exercise because you're like, wow, like if I just make it exaggerated as much as possible, you kind of get like a to-do list of like, okay, never do these things ever.
Yeah. Oh, another pet peeve.
Yes.
Stand by your price or the fact that you want to sell something. Because the amount of times people be like, hey, mate, I've got
So
the shirt,
be
I
unsure.
want to sell it
Be
for...
unsure about your
Yeah,
pricing.
be unsure. Yes, be unsure about your pricing. But not in the sense like there's no problem with not knowing 100%. Be like, look, like I've got this shirt, I'm thinking around 250. I would like, what do you think it's worth? Because people, I'm open to have those conversations, no problem. But or being like either offer, like I'm open to offers on it. Like it's definitely for sale, but like the right number has to be. Okay, well, what's the right offer? You have to tell me. Like that is annoying.
like I'm gonna buy and sell. I'm gonna do both jobs.
Oh yes, but like the amount of people as well, where like they'll send a shirt. Look, it doesn't happen all that often, but this would be a bad trade. If you're a seller, you post something, you say it's for $150, for example. Someone goes, "Yep, done $150. What's your PayPal?" Then you just leave them on scene. Hey mate, like just want to send you the money. What's your, how do you want me to send it to you? And then being like, oh, don't know. I don't think it's actually going to be for sale. Either I had a higher offer or I think I just want to keep it now.
Yeah.
That's probably another one. That's probably number 4.
Yeah.
And then number 5.
Number 5.
Oh, this is really rough.
Maybe something to do with customer service or maybe even interacting with other vintage sellers. How to make sure that like...
Don't be polite in any way, shape, or form.
So just be rude.
Blunt.
Just be rude.
Yeah,
and
just
blunt.
when people post something, just respond HM.
Yeah.
Not even a question mark. Not even how much. Not even hi, how are you?
Yeah.
How much are you selling this for? Just be blunt. Be rude. And I'm actually going to add in a 6th now. I've gone from not being able to think of any of them to like a whole a whole bag full. Think that you know better than everyone and that you're better than everyone else.
Yeah.
You're the gatekeeper of the community.
That's crucial.
Yeah. That's the number one.
That's
the number one thing.
Yeah.
That's the number one way to fail in the vintage community.
Love it. Fun, right? Fun, right?
I love that game. What did you call it again?
It's like
inversion?
It's an inversion exercise. So it's kind of like, and it works with like a lot of decision making as well. It's like so
Interesting.
Charlie Munger talks about like mental models. So this idea that like you have a lattice of like a framework that you work within, and then you have these interconnecting ideas. And so like if you have to come up with a difficult decision, like or a goal, like how do I guarantee that I do not hit this goal? And then you write everything down that like, okay, if I want to get
away from that.
if I want to get fit, okay, I need to make sure that I'm eating 17 meals a day and they're all bad. I need to make sure I never work out. I need to drink 6 bottles of Pepsi Max every single day. You know what I mean? And it just gets, it's quite ridiculous in terms of the concept, but it really helps with clarity. And that clarity can really that clarity is everything to me. That's your focus. The clarity is the focus.
Wow.
So yeah,
I'm gonna do this more.
Yeah,
I like it.
Man, as soon as I heard of it, I was like, man, this is great. Like, because it's just so ridiculous.
That's really good.
It's just so ridiculous, you know.
That's unreal.
All right, so if you had to start over again, no connections, no following, maybe you've got a handful of vintage t-shirts, so you don't have a drop. How are you building a page? What are your first moves? And let's concentrate on today's market where you did say like Instagram's harder to build.
Yeah, it's funny because people always not always, but when I speak about starting the brand and starting Faded, going back to what I said before, it's always timing. Timing is the most important thing. I could have done exactly what I did 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was, today, and in 5, 6, 7 years time,
different.
I could have had 200 followers, stuff just sitting on a website. It's all about timing. I was very lucky. I don't think it was, I've worked hard. Obviously, I've done as much as I could over a long period of time. And, it's resulted in successes. But I'm not under any illusion that I'm doing anything special from anyone else. I've sort of just followed my process. And I was very lucky in terms of when I entered a market that was sort of evolving. So I've been very fortunate from that aspect. I think today's day and age, I think what makes you different is having quality over quantity. I think people appreciate when they see things that they haven't necessarily seen on a consistent basis. I think, a lot of the stores, you probably see the same items over and over because that's the bread and butter. That's the stuff that sells well. It's desirable. I think I see a lot of pages come through, and the ones that are super successful are the ones that bring either a different twist, a unique outlook on what everyone else is doing, or they have unique items, stuff that you don't necessarily see. And in terms of vintage, that's probably the route that I would take, because you would stand out from everyone else. And especially in, it's a relatively populated market, I think, at the moment. There's a lot of people selling the same thing. So if you want to stand out, I think that's probably the best way to do it. I don't think it's guaranteed growth, but if you wanted to do something that was going to make you stand out above the rest, having a unique, either whether that's how you take your photos, unique products probably the most important thing. And then really just honing in on that, because I was fortunate enough at the time that I did things that I had the ability to try for a really long period of time to see what works. And you sort of get that over time. Like I said at the start, I took inspiration from pages like Burnt Out, from NL, and I sort of found my rhythm from them, right? So I think, there's a lot of influence out there, finding parts from different people that you appreciate, but then creating your own is the most important thing, because a lot of people come and go. They have the same shirts, they do the same photos, they copy what other people are doing. In the long term, that's probably not going to work because you're no different than to the other stores. So I think if you bring a unique twist, you bring a unique product, that's what's going to catch your eyes out. And there's some pages doing that are doing really well, and you see them growing. But it is, as hard as it is, it's getting harder to grow on Instagram. It's getting harder to sell on Instagram, as people, shift more so to, COVID was a big boom time and there was so many options. I think people are really refining down in terms of who they're buying from now. People have like the same handful of people they go to on a consistent basis. So I think it's very hard for some of those new pages. I don't think people really follow people anymore. I think people more so browse. I just think in social media in general, back in the day, you saw something you liked, you would follow the page and then you'd always get updates. Whereas now I feel like people just go on, they'll see something they like and they keep it in the back of their mind, which doesn't make sense. I'm probably a culprit of it. I'll see a page that I like and I'm like, oh, they got cool stuff. And instead of following, I'm just like, oh, I'll remember that for next time. Like,
and then you don't remember for next time.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Which is stupid, because to follow someone is so easy. But like I said, I probably do it myself as well. So I think it's getting a lot harder. So if you want to sort of stray away from what everyone else is doing and create something that's unique and memorable, you have to create your own. Take inspiration is, the best way to do that, but make it your own. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah. Great advice. What is...
It's hard.
Yes. Very hard. What is something you would have told your younger self before you started selling vintage? If you could go back and just talk to younger Alex and be like, hey mate, like, things are going to be fun, but like, here, I need to tell you some stuff.
I just say it's all worth it. Like, there's so many times when you just question what you're doing. And there was, especially, I feel like things always go up and down. And that's not just when it comes to business or to vintage t-shirts. It's just with everything. Like, there's always going to be high moments where you're like, this is incredible. And there's always going to be moments when you're like, this is horrible. Why am I doing this? And, across 7 years now, there's been so many times when I've probably been taking photos at 3:00 in the morning and I need to be up at 7:00 in the morning. And I'm just like, why am I doing this? Like, what am I doing this for? It would just be, just ride those hard moments out. Just stay focused, keep your eyes on the goal and what you want to do. And another thing I'll tell myself is just let things take you where they're supposed to go. Always be open to, trying new things. And just, I feel like if you're open, you will progress so much further. If you're closed-minded in what you do, you'll get to a certain extent, but you probably won't get much further than there. But like, the last few years have just been a real, like, whatever happens, happens. Experiment as much as I can, see what happens. And then from that, you build in these I've had these incredible experiences over the last few years. And it's all just because I've been open and willing, and I've just You just put your head down. This is what I want to do. I'm just going to continue to do it. So don't let the lows tarnish the highs that you've had and that you're going to continue to have. Just keep moving forward. That's it. Just keep moving forward.
Banger. Listen, we can close that out there. That was bars, bro. All right. So, Alex, just to close out, what are your next moves and where can people follow you?
Next move. First of all, people can follow us on Instagram, faded_AU. I've started dabbling in TikTok. It's really just the reels that I post on Instagram, on TikTok as well, when I remember to. So if you're a TikTok person and you don't like reels, go follow us on TikTok. Same at. But everything we do is just going to be on our Instagram, through our stories, through our website. We've also got a broadcast channel now, which it's a really great feature on Instagram. I like. You're able to sort of send out targeted messages to people that are interested. So definitely follow that. I post, drop information in there. Over the next year, like I said, I get the most enjoyment of sourcing for people the shirts that they want. I love the creative freedom I have with Faded. So I think you can expect over the next year, what I've been doing for the last 7 years is just trying to curate the best selection of t-shirts that, just everyone can access, whether they're, it's an 80s band tee or a 90s movie tee. I just want to be able to find the products and the shirts that people want and just get them in their wardrobe. That's the only thing I care about, is just getting people tees. I just love it. Like, as stupid as it sounds, like I've never cared about the money. I've never cared about anything I do for this page. Whatever I sell, I'm more tees. Like, that's all it ever is. Like, I don't know if I said, but the page started, the first thing I did when I started actually as a business was I bought a bunch of Queen shirts from France. I spent $600, and I promise when I say this, when I sold those shirts, I $600, bought $600 more worth of shirts, and then $1,000 more worth of shirts, and then $1,500. And it's continued and continued. So I purely do it for the love of it. And the next year is just going to be me experimenting, finding more shirts that I love, and just trying to get them to people. That's the most important thing. I want people to be able to hold up a t-shirt like, wow, I love this. I'm going to keep this till the day I die. I'm going to wear it. I'm going to wear it till it falls apart. It's faded. It's got holes in it. That's what I want. I just want people to enjoy the shirts as much as I do. So that's it pretty much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. This was awesome conversation, Alex. Appreciate you, bro.
No, thank you very much for having me. I'm keen for more episodes. Get more people on.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
My guy. Thank you.
Take care, man.